The U.S. Department of Energy's Oak Ridge Reservation is the site of a vital national defense facility and a modern computational and scientific center. But over the years, parts of the reservation have been contaminated with radioactive and other hazardous waste. DOE has been busy cleaning up those affected areas, but much remains to be done. Citizen input is a valuable part of that effort, and DOE welcomes advice from the Oak Ridge Site-Specific Advisory Board, a citizens panel that provides independent advice and recommendations on DOE's cleanup of the Oak Ridge Reservation. The board provides input on a wide range of environmental cleanup operations underway at Oak Ridge National Laboratory, Y-12 National Security Complex, and the East Tennessee Technology Park. You can be part of this important work by attending the monthly meetings of the Oak Ridge Site-Specific Advisory Board. For more information, call or visit our website.
Good evening and welcome to the 2014 edition and the January meeting of the Oak Ridge Site-Specific Advisory Board. I'd like to welcome you all here and just want to go over a few things before we get started and get kicked into the new year. Please turn off all of your electronic communication devices, beepers, cell phones, fax machines, cam recorders. The exits are marked if we have to evacuate the building, and if you do need assistance, assistance is available to help you out of the building. I do want to remind the members, please use your microphone because we are trying to capture all of the minutes and all the conversations for the meeting. And during the presentation, the question and answer period, the board members will be recognized first, then we'll followed by the public at our microphone. But glad you're all here. We're ready to start off another new year. Our next meeting will be Wednesday, February 12th, and the presentation is going to focus on the FY 2016 Oak Ridge EM budget and prioritization. Presenter at this time is to be determined. And at this point, I will turn now to the esteemed end of the table, Ms. Cange.
Good evening, everyone, and Happy New Year. In terms of an update of what's been happening in the cleanup program, I think the most significant thing has been the celebration that we had in mid-December for completing the demolition of the K-25 building. Now, it was not completion of the entire project, but it was taking down the very last portion of the building structure. And we were very fortunate to have several dignitaries with us to help celebrate, including the Deputy Secretary of Energy and several other people from headquarters. The project is progressing well ahead of schedule and under budget. It's projected to be complete this summer, which is about 18 months ahead of the federal baseline, and they're projecting a roughly $300 million savings from the current baseline for the project. So this provides an opportunity for us to work with both EPA and TDEC and see if we want to proceed with another activity at the site or accelerate cleanup of something else at the site. And we will be having those discussions shortly. So that was the big news for December. We're very, very happy and pleased with our progress on that particular project. And that's all I have. Any questions? Yes.
Don't you have news for January? Well, you got a budget?
Actually, we don't have a budget.
Why not? It was passed for the first time in 5 years.
Well, we don't have any budget numbers, and so yes. Otherwise, I would have been very happy
I was surprised you didn't say something.
That's the reason why there was a decision for a budget to be passed, but none of the agencies actually know what their numbers are, and that is something that is being worked by the various subcommittees, and we have not yet received any information. So we're still.
Expect it to?
Well, the current continuing resolution that we're operating under goes until January 15th. So we will either have our budget numbers before that time, or they will determine to extend the continuing resolution until they can finalize what our numbers are. So we are currently operating under the numbers that they gave to us in the continuing resolution, which is based actually on our 2012 funding, because we didn't have a budget in 2013. Yes, yes. So maybe next month we'll be able to share what our numbers are for 2014. Yeah. Anything else? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Kange. Next will be our Department of Energy liaison, Mr. Adler.
Nothing for me this month, thanks.
All right. Next, we'll hear from the EPA. Mr. Jeff Crane is sitting in for Connie Jones, and Mr. Crane is on the phone.
Yes, I do not have anything to report also.
Are there any questions of the membership for the EPA? Okay. Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Crane. We're going to move on. Mr. Owsley from Department of Environmental and Conservation for the state.
Thank you, sir. I also have no announcements for this evening, but I would like to introduce the person that is sitting to my right, Chloe Ashley. She is a TDEC intern working with the DOE Oversight Office. She is working towards a Master of Public Health degree from the University of Tennessee in health and policy management with a focus on environmental management, and thought this would be a good experience for her. She'll be with us for the next 3 months.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Owsley. And Ms. Ashley, it's great to have you here, and hope you be able to take something away, and hope that we can learn something back from you in the same time. And if you feel that you need to speak to us, by all means, put your name tag up and wail away.
Okay.
Don't be embarrassed. Public comment period. Ms. Riley, would you handle that, please?
The public comment period is now open. Luther Gibson, please state your name, which I already said. Keep your comments to 3 minutes, please.
Thank you. Is this on, Spencer? Thank you. My name is Luther Gibson. For your information, I was chairman of the SSAB in 2001 and 2002, and I'm still alive and well. I'm working in emergency management for B&W at Y12, busier than ever. But I got a adrenaline rush and saw some things and thought I'd come in tonight and renew some acquaintances. As usual, Mr. Owsley and some of the officials have had nothing to say, but we're entertaining questions again. That sounded very familiar to me. Also, a number of items on your agenda look very familiar. I've not followed things very closely, and I don't want to say something irresponsible, but it looks like legacy waste paths, standards for recycling, and things where we were all dealing with that, years ago, and there's still obviously work needs to be done. And I also wanted to point out that I saw, it must have been at the last meeting where Corky had a report about going to the chairs meeting. Her and I went to the 2001 chairs meeting in Santa Fe. How interesting. You might find that, or maybe not. And finally, I'd like to thank the staff for putting a small paragraph in the January issue of the Advocate. It just so happened that the schedule worked out for the student representatives in 2007 and 2008, where my son was the student representative from Oliver Springs High School. And he's doing some good work down at Georgia Southern University, mapping a Civil War site called Camp Lawton. And if you get a chance, if you're a Civil War buff, look on the internet. They have a Facebook page with a lot of the work they're doing down there to investigate that site. So I thank you for the time tonight and the opportunity to be here.
Are there any other members of the public who want to comment? All right. As a Citizens Advisory Board to the Department of Energy on environmental cleanup, we want to encourage the community at large to attend and participate in our board and committee meetings. If you are unable to attend, please send in your questions and comments to the address shown on the board. Appropriate comments and questions will be read during the public comment section of the SSAB meeting and will be given the same consideration by the board and DOE as those given in person. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Riley. And Mr. Gibson, thank you very much for appearing, and maybe you can share some of your wisdom with some of us future leaders here. So I do appreciate it.
Thank you, I'm willing to.
Okay. Next up is a presentation on the waste disposal capacity. Mr. Hicks, would you please introduce our speaker tonight?
Certainly. The subject is of continuing interest to us, of course, waste disposal capacity in Oak Ridge. And we're very pleased to have with us tonight Laura Wilkinson. She began her career at Oak Ridge National Laboratory as a program manager for facilities and infrastructure programs. She served as a program manager in the reindustrialization program, and that's the program that was targeting the transfer of the DOE gaseous diffusion plant into a private sector industrial park. Prior to joining the EM program, she served as a senior technical advisor to the Oak Ridge operations manager and to the assistant manager. She's had a good lot of experience here. She's currently the Portfolio Federal Project Director for the DOE Environmental Management Program Office in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. She's had many years of experience. I won't tell you how many, but it's a lot, 22. And she is heavily involved and has been responsible for the planning and execution of the EM cleanup and waste management activities at the Y-12 and for the Oak Ridge Transuranic Waste Inventory. I don't need to say any more. I ask, though, that unless she wishes otherwise, and I haven't conferred with her on this, would we please hold our questions until after she has completed her presentation? But this is an important subject, and we look forward to hearing from her. At that point, we look forward to hearing from her.
Good evening to everyone, and thank you again for the opportunity to have me here today to share with you the latest developments in our planning activities for ensuring circular disposal capacity for the DOE cleanup here in Oak Ridge. Move over here so everybody can you all see the slides from there? Before I start providing a status update, I wanted to give a little bit of background for those of you that are new to the board or that would like a refresher. Basically, the on-site circular disposal facility, also known as the Environmental Management Waste Disposal Facility, or EMWMF, was the selected remedy over 10 years ago for disposal of waste from cleanup of Oak Ridge Reservation site facilities of DOE. And it has provided safe, compliant, and cost-effective disposal of those remediation waste. And it primarily receives building demolition debris and soils from the sites that are being cleaned up. And the higher contamination waste, such as process equipment, is typically disposed of at off-site disposal facilities, either permitted disposal facilities or DOE disposal facilities that are located in the western states. This is a picture of the EMWMF, and it basically consists of 6 disposal cells. 5 of those cells are either active or have been filled. There are other water management features that include a leachate collection system and leachate storage tanks, contact water collection ponds, and contact water tanks. And that's just a brief introduction of what the EMWMF is. In terms of status of the facility, we have operated the facility compliantly and safely for the past 10 years plus. The facility has been built out to the maximum capacity that is allowed by that particular site, and that is 2.18 million cubic yards. And that expansion, the last expansion, or Cell 6, was completed in 2011. And the facility is approximately 63% full as of the end of December of last year. And it has enabled the accelerated risk reduction and cost-effective risk reduction across the reservation by supporting the demolition of buildings K33 and K25 and other Recovery Act projects at ORNL and Y12. One thing is that on-site disposal is really key to the cleanup program here in Oak Ridge. It has supported efficient cleanup because essentially it avoids the cost of transporting the waste to these western state disposal facilities, which is very expensive. We have conservatively estimated that we have avoided approximately $500 million from the beginning of the cleanup program to date in off-site disposal cost. Having the facility then optimizes the use of available funding for cleanup because we don't have to use those funds to support the transportation of the waste. It reduces the transportation risk and also carbon emissions that result from that heavy transportation of waste. It allows the EM cleanup program to control our waste disposal activities and the availability of waste disposal, so it allows more flexibility from a project management perspective for the cleanup program. And the monitoring that we have been doing for the past 10 years indicates that the waste is being safely contained in the facility. And what you have here is an example of the successes that the EMWMF has supported in the cleanup program here in Oak Ridge. This is the K25 facility, approximately a mile long prior to demolition. And this is the facility just before demolition was completed in December. And all of that demolition debris went to the EMWMF. So that was, one example of how the on-site circular disposal facility has supported the success of the cleanup program. We essentially evaluate our disposal capacity needs long-term. We look at the life cycle of the cleanup program, and we take all the projects that are planned through that life cycle at the three sites, ORNL, Y12, and ETTP, and we sequence and schedule those projects. And then we estimate for each project a waste generation amount per year, and then we sequence that waste generation. And then we add a 25% uncertainty factor to those waste estimates. So what you see here is the result of that waste forecasting process for the future, beginning in FY14 all the way through the current estimated completion date for cleanup program in Oak Ridge, which is 2041. And essentially this is the waste generation forecast on an annual basis, not cumulative, but annually. The blue bars are, so to backtrack a little bit, once we have those estimates of waste generation per year, we evaluate that against the remaining capacity at the EMWMF to predict when we will be needing additional capacity to support the cleanup program in the future. And what you see here is the result of that evaluation, and the blue bars represent the waste that can be accommodated in the existing facility, the EMWMF, and the red bars are the waste that we plan to generate but that cannot fit in the existing facility, the EMWMF. And essentially, as you can see, 2023 is the forecast year. And again, this is a conservative forecast, but FY 2023 is the year when we expect the existing facility to be full, and we need to come up with a solution for how we're going to dispose of the waste after that we generate. And this forecast is based on a $429 million budget assumption. So depending on how much budget you get, there's fluctuations as we update this on an annual basis on what that forecast will be as we get closer to that 2023 date. We'll know with more certainty precisely when that capacity will be needed. This is essentially the same data on a cumulative basis with the 2013 bar representing the waste that has been generated to date, and then for 14 and on, the cumulative waste generation projection. And the main thing that I want you to take away from this is that, as I said, in 2023, when we expect the current facility to be full, for the waste that we expect to generate after that as a result of cleaning up the remaining of the legacies in the Oak Ridge Reservation, we estimate that we need additional capacity equivalent to the size of the existing EMWMF, roughly 2.5 million cubic yards. So essentially, capacity equivalent to the size of the existing facility will be needed to support completion of the cleanup program in Oak Ridge. And that would be, again, beginning in 2023. So where do we go from here? Essentially, we need to plan ahead. That's our job. We need to make sure that we have that capacity when we need it, in whichever form it may be. So we have begun that planning process using the CERCLA process. We are currently in the first step of the CERCLA process, which is the remedial investigation and feasibility study phase. And we have submitted a couple of drafts of the RIFS to the regulators and have received a lot of comments that we're currently addressing. The next step would be to develop a proposed plan, which will mark the beginning of the formal public consultation period, and that would be followed by a record of decision. So before I give you the details of what the results of that process are thus far, I wanted to make sure that I don't leave anyone with the impression that any decisions have been made either regarding whether or not we're going to have a new CERCLA facility and where that facility will be located. We are, again, following the CERCLA process and in the first step of that process. But we do have some information that have resulted as part of that first step that is giving us some indication of what the possibilities are. And that's what I want to share with you today. So again, the public and stakeholder involvement and consultation will continue through the process until that decision is reached. And we have had, I think this is the fourth presentation that we have with portions of the SSAB. I think the EM committee, or there were 3 presentations to that committee, and this is the first one to the full SSAB. We also had a presentation to the City Council, and we will continue to do this as we move forward and as you desire to share the information that we have. These 2 pictures are some examples of the types of facilities that are slated to be demolished in the future, for which we will need disposal capacity in addition to what we have today. So we basically, as part of the RIFS, are evaluating 3 possible alternatives. The first is the typical no-action alternative. And what that would involve is that we would not have a reservation-wide coordinated disposal strategy, and instead we would be making CERCLA disposal decisions on a project-by-project basis. The second alternative is on-site disposal, which again would involve constructing a new CERCLA disposal facility similar to the one that is already in place, the EMWMF. And lastly, off-site disposal, which again involves transporting the cleanup waste to approved off-site disposal facilities, primarily out west. For example, the Nevada National Security Complex and the Energy Solutions facility in Utah. The preliminary results of that alternative analysis basically say that the no-action alternative is really not an alternative because it doesn't support timely and efficient cleanup, which is what we have to make sure that we do. In terms of the other 2 alternatives, the on-site and off-site disposal alternatives, they both support timely cleanup, and they're both protective of human health and the environment long-term. However, they each have, unique qualities, if you will, or unique features that make one favorable over the other, and I'll get into those a little bit now. For on-site disposal, or the building this new disposal facility that we're using this term to refer to it just to make it easier for us, Environmental Management Disposal Facility, or EMDF. So that would involve a permanent commitment of land for waste disposal and the corresponding environmental impacts from that. It is the lower cost alternative of those two alternatives, with an estimated life cycle cost of $817 million, and that's all the way from construction through closure. So it includes construction, operations, and closure. And it requires a record of decision to be completed by FY 2016. The reason for that is there are operational consideration reasons that necessitate the new facility to be operational at least 18 to 24 months before the existing facility is full. So we would need the new facility no later than 2022 to support the projected capacity utilization of the existing facility by 2023. So in terms of off-site disposal, the benefit of off-site disposal is it could potentially more effectively isolate the waste because of the arid climate in the western states and because of the isolated quality of those facilities. However, relying on those facilities again introduces uncertainty and reduces flexibility for the cleanup program in terms of how we plan and execute our work. There are significantly higher risks due to transportation, and the costs are significantly higher, $2.4 billion versus $817 million estimated for the on-site facility. And the key to this is that if we have to go this route, it'll just take longer because our budgets, as you know, are not getting any larger. So it will just take longer to get the cleanup completed, and those risks have to be carried for a longer time than if we have a facility on site that is much less costly. So when we cited the EMWMF and did that public and stakeholder involvement process, there were a lot of sites that were evaluated, and we've evaluated essentially the same sites this time around because there's still, alternatives, and have basically screened those sites. Some of the reasons for screening those sites are karst features at the sites not having enough area to accommodate the capacity needs that we're estimating that we will need in an efficient manner. Having a designated land use that is not compatible with waste disposal, is mainly unrestricted land use or is reserved for future research activities. And those are really the primary ones, but there are several reasons, again, that were the same rationale that was used to originally screen the sites, and we've preliminary screened the sites. And the East Bear Creek Valley, which is the location of the EMWMF, is emerging as the preferred site for a new facility for the same reasons that it was selected originally over 10 years ago for the EMWMF. And before I get through those reasons, and I'll probably have to have you look at your slide because this is not as clear on the wall here as it is on your slides. Right here is the Y12 site, and this orange line demarcates the East Bear Creek site. So it's immediately west of the Y12 site, right past the main entrance portal to the Y12 plant, which would be somewhere around here. So there's restricted access to that area. This is the location of the existing facility, the EMWMF. This area right here is the Bear Creek Burial Grounds area, which is a former waste disposal area that was closed under RCRA. And this area right here, again, is a former waste disposal area, former sanitary landfill at the bottom that has been covered and closed, oil land farm closed under RCRA, and a former waste disposal facility, the burn yard that some of you may be familiar with. So essentially, one of the main reasons that this area is really desirable is because historically and currently has and is being used as a waste management and waste disposal area. So it's most compatible with the future land use designation, which is controlled industrial land use. Is most favorable for isolation from the public because it's essentially in the backyard of the Y12 site and access is restricted. And as such, vehicular impacts to the local community are minimized. And again, these are the same reasons that that drove the decision to locate the EMWMF in this area. So this is basically where we are in terms of how these remedial investigation feasibility study evaluation has preliminary concluded after evaluating all these sites. This is just a schematic diagram of the new facility, the proposed new facility relative to the existing facility. And basically, one of the key features of this particular setup is that it allows for the entire projected capacity need to be accommodated in that space in terms of a more, instead of having a more inefficient, broken down several facilities in that area or in another area. Another thing that I wanted to highlight here is that this site, just as the existing site, would not be built out immediately. The cells are built on an as-needed basis, so we would start with the first 2 cells when we begin the facility operation, and then based on projections of waste generation, we would plan and implement construction projects to build out to full capacity if necessary, when and if necessary. These other things I think we've talked about. The other thing is the conceptual design that is being put together as part of the RIFS accommodates hydrology of the site using engineered fixtures to control surface and groundwater. So we are applying the lessons that we learned from the siting of the EMWMF and the necessity to deal with water features in that location to this new location, which has similar water features. This is a planning schedule. As I said before, we're in the first step of the CERCLA process toward a record of decision, which is the remedial investigation feasibility study. Our current plan is to complete that process by the end of the first quarter of 2015. Again, that would be followed by a proposed plan that we project to be complete by the end of the third quarter of 15 to support getting a record of decision by the end of the second quarter of 16. And again, this is all to support having the cells constructed by 2022. So in summary, on-site disposal is really key to our program here in Oak Ridge. It has proven to support the efficient, safe, and cost-effective completion of our cleanup activities. We know for sure that we will need additional capacity in order to complete all the cleanup work that we're projecting at the reservation, particularly ORNL and Y12. Many potential locations for new facility are being considered and were considered also for the EMWMF. Again, the preferred location is emerging to be the same location for the existing facility because of the historic and current use of that area as a waste management area. It's a brownfield area, it's adjacent to Y12, and it utilizes or takes advantage of the existing infrastructure at the EMWMF to support the operation of the new facility. Again, the key here, we would need a ROD by 2016, if that was the decision that was made to proceed with that facility, to allow for an uninterrupted on-site disposal. And the public and stakeholder involvement and consultation will continue to be a key part of the process. And that's all I had to present.
Thank you, Laura. Very, I say, informational and educational. Are there any questions from the board? Mr. Bell?
Thank you. How is it determined and who will be responsible for cleaning up a facility, especially like some at X10, maybe the 9200 series at Y12? How clean does it have to be? Who will determine that, and who's going to be responsible for doing that?
In general, the EM program is responsible for cleaning and demolishing and remediating legacies from the Cold War and all the way back to World War II, and that focuses on process-contaminated buildings. There is not a differentiator on how contaminated it needs to be for the EM program to take it, as long as the building is process contaminated. In other words, if a building doesn't have any process contamination but has lead paint and asbestos, that would be the responsibility of the site program, in the case of Y12, NNSA, in the case of ORNL, the Office of Science, to clean up those facilities. If it's process contaminated, it is the responsibility of the EM program. We have, within our long-term life cycle plan, all the cleanup work necessary at Y12 and ORNL to address the legacies of the Cold War and World War II that remain and that involve process contaminated buildings, soils, sediments, and so on. So it is in our plan, it is in our projections. A lot of the facilities have already been accepted into the EM program. There are a lot of the facilities that are not formally into the program yet, but as we move forward, those transfers will be done when the budgets are there, and it is the EM's program responsibility.
One follow-up, Mr. Bell.
Am I that limited?
Yes, tonight you are, because other people have questions too. Then we'll come back.
But the these new areas to be filled will have to have some kind of a level of contamination before they can receive that material. Now, who's deciding that, and how will that be implemented, especially as you begin to destroy a facility where the level may change? That may be certainly true at X10. Does that make sense?
I think he's talking about characterization.
Yeah, you're talking about establishing cleanup criteria? Or waste acceptance criteria?
Well, both.
So,
You
okay,
got to
so,
have
right.
the criteria first and then the
Right.
acceptance criteria
So,
to
so
follow up on
the
that.
cleanup criteria is a tri-party decision made between DOE, EPA, and the state of Tennessee. And those levels that are developed and agreed to by the agencies are documented in the records of decision. And then so that's to determine what needs to be cleaned up, and if it does need to be cleaned up, to what level. And then there's the decision about whether the waste that is generated as a result of the cleanup can be disposed of at the on-site disposal facility that's currently in operation, or if it needs to be shipped off-site elsewhere for disposal. And there are waste acceptance criteria that the landfill has developed, and I must say a very rigorous process that is followed to characterize the waste streams and evaluate them to determine if they meet the criteria that have already been established and agreed to allow disposal in the on-site cell.
But you already have a waste acceptance criteria.
We do for the
Yes.
on-site disposal cell.
And you're assuming that will just continue on into,
No, we're not assuming that. We, as part of the record of decision for a new facility, if that was the decision, we would work with the state and EPA to agree on what the criteria for the new facility will be, applying lessons learned for the existing facility and the waste acceptance criteria that we're using there. So I don't think assuming that it's going to be the same is the right assumption. It may end up being the same. It may not. It depends on the negotiations between the three parties.
thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Ms. Hall?
How many other waste management facilities in the U.S. have the same kind of on-site disposal set up? Is it just the three?
Do you know the answer? I know that there's other sites that do. I know that Hanford has one. I know that Paducah is in the process of getting one. I know there's one in Ohio, but
Right. Basically,
I'm not sure that I know all of them.
almost all of the big DOE installations that are engaged in cleanup have an on-site disposal cell of some type. And as with us, they take the vast majority of the less contaminated material generated by cleanup and store it on site, dispose of it on site. They take the more contaminated slice and ship it somewhere else, for the most part out west. But essentially all of the big sites that have undergone cleanup, one exception to that is the Rocky Flats site, where they actually dug everything up and shipped it somewhere else. But if you look at all the other big sites you're used to hearing about, they have disposal facilities. Or are planning one, right?
Thank you. Ms. DeLong?
Thank you for your presentation. It was good. You did a good job.
Thank you.
Just two quick questions. One is, and sorry if this is a stupid question, but I'm just looking at the 2.5 million cubic yards, and wondering if there have been any efforts in developing the waste acceptance criteria and characterizing the waste. If there's any effort that's been made, and I know this is a stretch, to reduce the volume by seeing if any of that is something that can be recovered and sold. Also, when looking at the existing cells, and this is probably another stupid question, was there any thought given to maybe capping what's existing and going in the Y direction rather than going in the X direction?
To address your first question, which you basically, can you repeat it again?
So, like, is there anything?
Oh, waste minimization and waste management.
Volume reduction.
Yeah, we basically address that on a case-by-case basis for each project as we execute or get closer to the execution of the projects. There is consideration of what may be able to be recycled or disposed of at the landfills or reused. So that's part of the process for each project.
That's good. So that 2.5 cubic million cubic yards represents an effort.
That's a conservative, that's a conservative
Very good,
estimate.
very good. And so the other one is just, why not go in the Y direction, cap what's there and go in the Y direction as opposed to going?
That was one of the alternatives that was considered
really?
in the remedial investigation feasibility study. What is on that other side, you're saying capping to the west of the existing facility, or capping the existing facility?
Capping on top of what you already have and moving in the wide.
Yeah, I think that would be an insurmountable engineering challenge.
Okay. I thought maybe it'd be cheaper and easier, but sometimes it isn't.
I think it's already expected to be about, from the bottom of the waste is about several, do you know the number, tens of feet? What's the elevation of the waste pile after capping?
70 feet, approximately.
That's above
ground.
Okay, so we can't make it a monolith and parachute off of it or anything for future use.
I think it's going to be as big a monolith as it can be, and that went into the design actually of the facility. Yeah, and I will say that there are efforts, and there have been some projects where it's protective and where there's an agreement among all agencies to cap the material in situ where it already is located, as opposed to digging it all up and taking it to the landfill. But as Laura said, those decisions are made on a case-by-case basis to determine, again, where it's protective to do so, as opposed to where we have to either generate the waste or create it by demolishing buildings and then.
Well, and I don't think ORNL will ever achieve a campus atmosphere if it has all these monoliths around. Unless we put lots of flowers around them, I don't know.
Also, Mr. Long, one of the recommendations that we're going to be voting on tonight is a recycling recommendation, which would eliminate, or try to eliminate, a lot of the fairly decent steel and products from going into a landfill, so they can be reused later.
It's valuable.
Are there any more questions from the board? Mr. Paul, Colonel Paulus, excuse me.
This chart, I don't remember any briefings in the past. It was your fifth one in. I don't know if you've got a button that says 5 in. My question is, why are there some very significant spikes in 2018, 21, and 22? In terms of the amount, the volume. I can't remember anything being briefed of, we got this project planned 5 years from now where we're gonna tear down half the world.
Yeah, well, what we, our life cycle plan basically has the work happening before, before the mid-20s, so essentially would be that work. Most of that work is really work at ETTP. So it's the remaining buildings at ETTP that need to be demolished to complete ETTP cleanup. The Y12 and ORNL work is currently planned to begin in the mid-20s, if you will. So that's, that red, that's what that is. So those.
So it's a guesstimate.
It's an educated estimate, based on, fairly significant detail on what we have and what we expect.
And it is true, Laura makes a good point. If you look at our life cycle baseline for completing cleanup of all the facilities, and you can sort of follow it along this graph here, as Laura said, we are estimated to complete cleanup of the East Tennessee Technology Park in 2024. And then there's a ramping up period at Y12. The mercury use buildings follow. So you can see that the estimated volumes are a little less in the mid-20 period, while we're ramping down at ETTP and ramping up at Y12 until we ultimately get
we have
to.
The one spike, Susan, that's 5 times the norm.
Well, and I don't have my life cycle baseline with me, but if I had to guess, that would be where we would still be completing work at Y12
Transition.
and ramping up at ORNL. And so that's my guess, yeah.
Y12 actually comes after ETTP.
Yeah, ETTP is estimated to be complete in the 2024 timeframe, after which we'll start our work at Y12. And then once we are making significant progress at Y12, we'll start our work at ORNL, for the most part, in general terms.
2 or 3 times more at Y12 than it is K25.
Because of what's already been done at K25. This shows from today forward, not all the work that's already been done at K25.
I want to do one more.
Well, let me, wait, just hang on, Mr. Bell. Is there anyone from the audience? Oh, Jennifer?
Is it established, do they know what they're going to do to control the surface water and the groundwater? Do they understand the groundwater hydrology at that site, and are they going to use leachate control? Or?
You're talking about for the proposed cell location?
Yeah, the control, that's.
Yeah, we know quite a bit about the hydrology and the geology in that area, and the conceptual design includes engineered features such as under drain features like we have in the existing facility to control groundwater and surface water, to address groundwater and surface water issues. The other thing is we are in the process of initiating a phase 1 characterization of the proposed site to confirm a lot of the data that we extrapolated from the existing facility and basically validate all the assumptions that are made in the feasibility study. And that will be followed by more extensive characterization before a proposed plan and a record of decision are reached.
What about if you're projecting 50, 100 years from now that that you're not going to create a problem because eventually groundwater will penetrate?
Well, I am. I still have grandchildren.
Yeah, the cells are designed, that's a good question. The cells are designed with a very robust system of liners and caps and so on to address that. And there's a lot of monitoring that is done on a very frequent and periodic basis to make sure that we know what lies ahead and what changes we may need to address in the future in terms of hydrogeology. Jason Darby, he's the project manager, and Jason is a geologist. Do you have anything to add to answer that?
I'll just emphasize the studies that we have yet to do. We know a lot about the area because of the EMWMF next door and the characterization of that site. This is very close to that. But we are going to do this phase 1 characterization effort this year to gather further information on the EMDF site, proposed site. And then there'll be follow-on studies if that is a selected location to gather additional information for the design of the facility. And then as Laura points out, even after closure, there will be monitoring, of the site, of the conditions at the site.
But when you do your cost, and you say initially it's cheaper, but if there's problems down the road, putting it where there's more exposure to water could be far more costlier than transportation out west.
Do they look at that? From that standpoint, doing analysis?
That analysis has been done. First of all, your question is right on target. These facilities are all about keeping waste constituents out of water. Mm-hmm. Every aspect of their design basically is set up to address that feature. People have done studies to look at whether or not it's, from a life cycle standpoint, cheaper to take everything out west. What they've concluded is no, it's not cheaper to take everything out west. Certain things that are particularly concentrated and particularly mobile, it generally is more cost effective to take out west. The requirement for this facility is to be able to safely contain its contents in perpetuity. So in addition to a design up front that's designed to prevent problems, there are regulatory obligations, monitoring requirements, financial requirements that are set up to assure that if anything were to begin failing, if there was subsidence in the cap, or if there were the detection of something in the leachate collection system, there's an obligation to go in and fix it. So the basic idea behind what you're doing is to take a collection of wastes that are scattered over a 30,000 acre reservation, put them into one, take the worst of it, send it out west, take the rest and consolidate it into one well-engineered facility and contain it there safely, and then if necessary, maintain that facility so that the containment remains effective. That's pretty much the concept.
So up front, you're gonna you accommodate it by trying to take the stuff that would be more mobile and put it out west in the first place.
You do that in the first place, and then you build a very robust facility with these facilities are closed with a very thick earthen cap that essentially sheds all water that falls upon it. But then ultimately it depends upon stewardship and long-term surveillance and maintenance. You have to monitor the cap, look for evidence of any subsidence or erosion, and fix it so that it remains protective. And that takes some amount of money. Not nearly as much money as it would take to ship all this material out west at the outset, but it does take some amount of money.
And we also have the Land Use Manager Program, which is a real-time monitoring that keeps an eye on the waters, leachates and whatnot. Is there anyone from the audience that have a question of Ms. Wilkinson? Ms. Garaki?
Hi, thank you for the presentation, Laura. I was involved at the very beginning of the first EMWMF with all the as a stakeholder in the process, and at that time, stakeholders were assured that this cell would be more than adequate to dispose of the EM wastes on the reservation. However, what DOE neglected to say was that they were not, they only looked at existing planned EM wastes, and then we had a program with a forgettable acronym that added obsolete facilities from across the reservation to EM's waste stream, and then finally a massive ARA project which took down K33, which sort of sealed the fate of the EMWMF as far as the rest of EM wastes. And I guess my question is this really the end of it? Is one more facility going to be enough? Has DOE looked at all of its obsolete, potentially contaminated facilities?
What you were referring to was
soils.
the IFDP, the Integrated Facilities Disposition Program.
Right.
And that was what happened with, as the EM program has evolved, in parallel with that, a lot of facilities at ORNL and Y12 have become excess to the needs of the sites because of modernization efforts at both sites that have replaced a lot of the old buildings and a lot of the old infrastructure. That's what has caused the program to grow. The facilities, although they were being used, they were still legacy facilities from Cold War and World War II that were being used in spite of being contaminated and not being probably the most efficient ones. And with the modernization efforts, that has changed quite a bit. The intent of the IFDP was to inventory all of the facilities at ORNL and Y12 that were projected to be surplus 10 years out from when that program was established, which pretty much should cover everything that is legacy at ORNL and Y12. Of course, it doesn't include new things that are being built now, like the UPF or the HEUMF or any other facilities at ORNL. Those would have to be dealt at the appropriate time and if needed. But we believe that in terms of World War II and Cold War legacies, that the IFDP addressed what's remaining at both sites.
Okay, and my question is, will the proposed facility be adequate for all of this, including clean up soils and other cleanup activities?
Yes, we believe that we have made a conservative projection of what that capacity need is, and the 2.5 million cubic yards is what we would need to address that.
Okay, is someone writing this down, or am I going to be back here in 15 years?
We'll be back together.
The Oak Ridge Reservation holds an important place in our nation's history, and it continues to play a vital role in national defense and modern scientific and computational research. But decades of work on the reservation, dating back to World War II, have left some parts of the reservation contaminated with radioactive or other hazardous waste. It's the job of the U.S. Department of Energy to clean up those residual hazards. DOE relies on citizen input on those cleanup operations. The Oak Ridge Site-Specific Advisory Board is the primary source of advice and recommendations to DOE on its environmental management program. The board offers advice on a wide range of activities, from safe, secure disposal of radioactive waste to long-term stewardship of areas with waste left in place. Be part of this important work by attending the monthly meetings of the Oak Ridge Site-Specific Advisory Board. Call us for more information or visit our website.